Our senior advisor for foreign policy and national security was also election expert. He's been traveling the country, but we're going to talk about some of the foreign policy issues. We're going to continue to take your calls, too, on what's motivating you to get out to vote. What are your friends and family talking about? We're seeing these polls where things are really starting to shift back towards the issues that you would imagine. Getting people out, the economy, inflation, just this idea of the economic uncertainty. They're going to try to use this third quarter report, by the way, to say, oh, look, we're out of a recession. But when you look at the numbers in the third quarter report, the truth is that you see weaker housing numbers, decelerating consumer spending,
right,
an economy that is slowing. So it still feels like whatever the numbers show, it still feels that way. But I want to go to something international that's affecting all of us, which is how much the gas prices cost. And Ric Grenell, again, with your foreign policy experience, Rick, this idea, we now have the Secretary of State who's come out, Secretary Blinken. We are going to totally reevaluate our relationship with the Saudis at a time because of their move on cutting oil production, but we're picking a fight with the kingdom.
Look, I've actually even seen some Senate Democrats talking about the fact that they should investigate Saudi Arabia for interfering in our election. And the way that they look at this is that they're literally saying because the Saudis didn't respond to Joe Biden's pressure to manipulate the oil price through the election, because they didn't help him manipulate the election, that they decided to interfere in our election. But I mean, it's totally messed up. But the media are trumpeting this. Look, no one should be surprised that the Biden administration is finding themselves at odds with Saudi Arabia. They, from day one, when they came in, they picked a fight. They rehashed the Khashoggi incident. They manipulated intelligence to repackage it and pretend like something was new. They did that clearly because what they were trying to do is send a message to Iran that they could meet them at the table and show Iran that their nemesis, their opponent, Saudi Arabia, was also going to be under pressure from the United States. This was a disaster from the beginning, and now we're seeing it unfold.
Rick, but doesn't the fact that we've got this, awkward, I would call it, I guess is being kind, relationship with Saudi Arabia, when we had a great relationship with Saudi Arabia, we've got military assets in Saudi Arabia. The relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia has never been stronger. To pick a fight with the Saudis right now because they won't give you the oil price you want, they got to protect their own economy too, seems to be counterintuitive, except this whole administration seems to be counterintuitive.
Yeah, and you hit it on the head, Jay. Look, we also always have to remember to talk about the reforms that are desperately needed in Saudi Arabia. This is a country that systematically denies basic human rights. So we always have to be able to call them out. And yet, what you're alluding to is the fact that we had a really good relationship where we were pushing them for reform. There was even talk about the Saudis signing the Abraham Accords, and that would have been unbelievably historic. That's how far we were making progress. Now, of course, they still are problematic in many ways, but for the Middle East, for that region, it's really important to make sure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. We have to work very closely with the Saudis and all others in that region to ensure that Iran, this terrible regime, doesn't get a nuclear weapon. They've already said they want to wipe Israel off the map. You've got Iran wanting to wipe Israel off the map. You have the Saudis moving towards a possible, Abraham Accord signature peace deal with Israel. So we need to be very realistic about this relationship, and picking a fight over, some sort of manipulation of the elections and gas prices, the midterms, I think is a real problem.
It's interesting because the Saudi energy minister put out the message very clearly in English, quote, people are depleting, he didn't say the U.S., but obviously you can read into this, people are depleting their emergency stocks. They've used it as a mechanism to manipulate markets, while its profound purpose was to mitigate the shortage of supply. And he says, my profound duty to make it clear to the world that losing emergency stock may become painful in the months to come. Rick, we talked about the concern of using the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in the United States as a cost reduction method for political purposes, not for just national security purposes. The Saudis have picked up on the same line of reasoning. And I think the long-term message here is, unless something changes very dramatically between the relationship, is they're going to continue cutting production.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, because we've seen now the Biden administration do two very political things to try to manipulate gas prices and help them in the election. One is using the strategic reserve, which is really meant for crises, serious crises, not for political crises. And by the way, political crises that they have made, they are responsible. When you cut production, when you mock those people who are doing production, it's going to be a real problem later on for the equilibrium price. That's pretty basic economics. So we're seeing the Biden administration do what they always do, which is play politics, manipulate the situation, and then point the finger at the other guy saying, wait a minute, you're the one playing politics. We see it over and over at DOJ, the IRS, and now we're seeing it with foreign policy.
Charlene calling from New Jersey on line 4. Hey, Charlene.
Hey, how are you guys doing
Great.
today? I have a couple questions. Well, actually, it's kind of like one question, but it has to deal with Pennsylvania.
Yep.
They came out on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd and said they're not going to be able to count all the votes by the end of Election Day, which I think is ridiculous. And two, the Supreme Court came out and said that the fact that they were counting ballots without valid dates on it were against the law.
Correct.
And they came out with the ruling and said you can't do that. But PA came out and said they're going to do it anyway. I don't understand why they can get away with this.
Well, they on the latter, Rick, I could address that, because the one case I had at the Supreme Court during the election was Pennsylvania. And it was those late, remember the court changed the date upon which the ballots could come in. And the legislature, under the laws of Pennsylvania, that is solely within the discretion of the legislature. So I went to the Supreme Court of the United States, got a stay from Justice Alito, referred to the court, we got it, and they had to segregate those votes. I want to dispel something, though, Rick, because we're hearing this every day, and you're out in the field. People have to vote, and you're hearing things about they're not going to count this, they're not going to count that. We have got to people have to go out and vote. And the problem when you hear all this negative and naysaying is people won't. And I think that cost us in Georgia last time. We cannot do that again.
Yeah, look, we have to make it very difficult for them to cheat by having everybody vote. And everybody votes and we have an overwhelming win, then it's very hard for them to cheat. So I would encourage everybody to get out and vote. This is crucial. We know the voter rolls are a mess. We know mailing ballots to people on voter rolls when the voter rolls are a mess is a real problem. We have to clean that up. I think we have much more aggressive legal action on Election Day. We have legal teams in the swing states where there could be a problem. They're ready to go. I know in Nevada and Arizona specifically, we're very ready to go.
How do you feel about the Laxalt race? It looks like he's up +2. I mean, it's close. Obviously, everybody needs to vote.
Yeah, look, everybody needs to vote. I think Adam has run an incredible campaign. And one of the things that I would just say is get out in Nevada and vote. Support Adam Laxalt. I think he's up. I think he's going to win.
All right.
All right, Rick, as always, we appreciate it. We'll keep you on the broadcast, keep you updating with everybody throughout these next couple of weeks because, again, people are traveling the country. We got a great team of folks.
But it's underscore what Rick and I said, and you've been saying, you got to vote, folks.
Oh, yeah.
Do not, and Rick, if you're still with us, we got to underscore this. There's this sentiment that's out there that, what happened in 2020, and what's the point? The point is, it matters. Your vote's going to count. I think reiterating that would be really helpful right now because I'm watching the comments come in. Yep.
Yeah, I think you've got to vote, and I think you've also got to realize is that we have done some fundamental fixes.
Right.
Clearly, there's more things to do, but we're much more aggressive about the legal operations.
Yes.
And we're going to be watching. They are not going to be able to manipulate like they did before. We still have work to do. We're getting better, but you got to get out and vote and help us.
Thank you, Rick, for joining us.